Hola, ¿qué tal? Hello? Yeah. So normally I would start with an example, but I actually have a question and he was gone. So who in the audience feel comfortable to answer a question? Daniel? Yeah. So when I ask you to cut a piece of paper, what's the third thing you comes to mind for doing that? Scissors. Oh, scissors. That's it, right? Most of the people think of scissors. Thank you. But is it actually a good tool? Is it a tool we use on a day-to-day basis? Do we feel comfortable? What's wrong with a giant laser? It does the same work. Or just use your hands. It's so much easier. And what I found out is most people think of solutions. I use scissors to cut a piece of paper. Rather than the problem, why do I need to cut the paper? What's wrong with the paper? And to give you more insight on, for you, you will do probably the same. You think of solutions rather than expectations. In this case, user expectations. Because we know the user, right? Well, do we? Well, talking about, so I will hopefully shed some light on user expectations. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Wiebe Elsinga. Sorry, difficult name. When I was born, my parents didn't take in consideration that I will be speaking internationally. I'm a two-time Google developer expert, so one for Android, yay, and one for product strategy, yay. Basically, I'm always the odd one out. I'm a developer that loves design. So I always feel like I don't belong. Well, here I belong. And to get to know you, I want to know who I'm speaking to. I know there are designers and developers out there, so let me ask you different questions. Who's using an iPhone? Show of hands. Yay. Who's using Android? Any BlackBerry people out there? No? Microsoft, maybe? I suppose to say Huawei these days because it's not Android anymore. No? So most of the people know iOS. Oh, cool. So I have to warn you, there are some bad examples that I will be discussing. It's good to see my previous talk. My previous speaker was about bad applications, but I'm talking about bad user expectations. So, and I tend to pick iOS as bad example because I'm a Google fanboy. But don't get me wrong, there's plenty of wrong things with Android. So let's get back to solving for user expectations. Actually, let's get back to the user and their truth. Because I did a lot of research starting my job, and it's quite easy to do some user research and to see how users are using their mobile apps, their mobile interface. But the human actually is quite weird. We think we know them, we think we do, but actually most of our apps are being used by totally different people on a totally different way. This was in the subway, by the way. We use our mobile phone in the most weirdest situations. We tend to think we know how they use it. Again, in the most weirdest situations out there. So how hard is it for you as a developer or a designer to actually create something that is used not the way you're used to? There is a different approach as well. Because of group pressure, people tend to learn new technologies, new design, new patterns much more easily. A good example is, we've mentioned it before, it's the hamburger menu. From a UI point of view, it's handy because it is something you can tuck away. From a UX point of view, it is quite weird because it's a hidden feature that supposedly does magical stuff, and all of a sudden I get so many options. But we're used to it. Well, for Android, we're used to it, and then now we're fed up because we're used to it. But group pressure is something to take in consideration. A good example, I was in Africa and I was really enjoying my stay. I went on a safari and I was just looking at a giraffe and he came to me and it was a really nice experience. And the two ladies that I don't know prior to this were really enjoying their mobile phone. Actually, they were really busy taking a selfie to actually be more popular. And it's quite weird for me. It takes away like the pressure you have, the surprise you have when a giraffe is in front of your face instead of front of your camera. And we forget as developers and designers, we sometimes forget to have the focus where it needs the most, and that's the user. And also the diversity is enormous. Somebody told me today an app, it can depend the content on a country, religion. So how is it possible that we as designers and developers think we can create an app that's for everybody? That's impossible. So let's have a look at the user's truth. First of all, they don't trust you. Well, I don't trust my mobile phone. And still we give it a lot of data. And this was it was an old app, by the way. It was an app to know any child of sex offenders near me. But as it was, iOS needs permission to share your location. Is it quite handy when the app says, hey, do you want to share your location with sex offenders? I don't think so. They didn't take it into consideration. It took them 2 iterations to change this. So moreover, for Android, obviously we have these days, we're supposed to ask for permission for everything that is sharing outside of your app content. So that gives a user much more control over the content that is being shared. So they still trust you a little bit, but give them the control, give them the feeling that they are in control. They expect you to communicate. I do like Americans, I just don't like Trump, so you might be seeing more of him later. No, as a person to another person, we tend to talk to each other quite often. There's a human relationship, and we tend to use voice as a way to communicate. But what's lacking these days in an application for a user is to do the same. How is it that when I have a trouble with my mobile phone because it's not doing anything to solve my problem, why can't I talk to somebody on the other side? I know it's the contact of an app, but why isn't there like a feature or a possibility to have a contact with a human being? A good example is I did an application for an airline company, or actually an airport. And in the airport lounge, there was a person who was just there for answering questions, and we had the mobile app. And the mobile app has a cool feature. You can do live chatting with somebody. But still, everybody was walking to that person because they want to have confidence that somebody is listening. So why can't we have that in our mobile app? Have the confidence for a user to contact you. Or a good example, Shem said previously about giving hints about being transparent. Be transparent in your app. When something changed in your app, a status, an error, just say what happens. Don't be afraid to at least admit there's something wrong, or give them aid, help them, because that is all they want, to help you, help us solve their problem. These days, mobile users are quite smart. Let's say 10, 15 years ago, or if you look at my mother, it's always a good example looking at my mother. She's not dumb, she knows how to use Facebook. She's not a prehistoric dinosaur. So your users that use your app aren't dumb. A good example, by the way, are there marketing people in here? No? Good. Oh, yeah. 1, 2. No? Okay, cool. So this is really a dumb ad. Can somebody explain me what's wrong with this ad? I hope everybody. Why do you want to know if you're pregnant if you're already pregnant? This is an actual ad I saw, really. And to be more mobile, so cool. Somebody made an app, really cool, and you can download it to find stuff. But what's wrong? Where do I find the app? Is it an iOS? Is it an Android? I don't know. What's the name of the app? Still don't know. So you create an app to find stuff, but you can't actually find the app. Not really good. And sorry, again, a bad example. What's this? An Apple Watch. It is a cool watch, don't get me wrong. And Apple is way ahead of Android. But there's something wrong with the first release. Can somebody say what's wrong? Beside the price? Well, no, it's actually that good. Yeah? Yeah? You can tell?
So you have to click the wheel.
Well, it's not that bad. You can turn and click the wheel, so that's 2 gestures. Woo. Well, let me ask you a question. Which hand is your watch on? It's on your right hand, right? Anybody who's wearing their mobile watch on their left hand? Yeah, so what happens if you wear this? Oops. This is an actual problem. This was an actual problem. And how did they solve it, the first release? They made a software update asking, are you a left-hand or right-hand watch carrier? It doesn't solve the problem. And these are those minor things they didn't take in consideration. So that doesn't mean that you should withhold them from the obvious. They're not dumb, I know, but you can still give them aid, where is it? By adding those additional information. It doesn't block the user, but it helps them. It helps them ease into like the whole user experience. Also, Shem told me, you can even add hints as long as it doesn't block stuff. Because it's much more annoying to having, hey, you can do this by a pop-up. But there's so much easier when you have those subtle like hints out there. But you should ask your designer because he already knows this. And we're busy these days. We're a 24 economy and we're busy all the time. So what does that mean as a user? Well, we're not scrolling through miles and miles of text just to get to know your app or to get started. No. A good example is if you're building an app that has something to do with taking pictures, make it easy just to take pictures. Don't block them with having, well, what's your color saturation, what's the size of your photo diagram. Just let them take the picture and worry afterwards. Did you get the photo, Marie? Okay. This is a good friend of mine, by the way. He's also GDE. I want to take the piss out of him. People just do enough to get by. As we're busy, we are taking the subway, we just want to know at which time or which line we need to take. So how bad would it be if we should answer like 8 questions before we finally do stuff? And a good example for me was when we did the airport app. People were always, most of the time when they use their app, they're quite worried that they're not going to catch their flight. So give them just enough information saying, it's okay, you're going to catch your flight, don't worry. Yeah, we could give them much more information like the baggage belt, where to drop off stuff. And we did, don't get me wrong, but they complained. So even though your feature set might be really good, really useful, don't block the user with all those additional features. Keep it minimal. And I had a discussion with a designer on this as well. We have, as a user, different moods and different modes. By meaning, if I miss my flight, even though it's my fault, I will be pissed. And the first thing I will react is on the mobile app, because it's giving me maybe less information than I wanted to. Or if my train left just 2 minutes prior to the schedule, I will complain. So it will affect you as an app designer, app developer, that people will complain without the obvious. So take that in consideration. Don't be mad. It will happen. They will complain, even though there's nothing to complain. But you can take that in consideration. What you can do is at least give them the options to turn down notifications. Because if they're really pissed, or they're really busy, or they're really tired, just give them the option to declutter information. And this helps the user being more and more in a good relationship with your mobile app. Also, probably most of your apps aren't being used as you think they're being used. And again, a good example is we built the airport app, and the first release we thought, well, the app will be used by only frequent flyers or people that do a lot of flying or transferring. So we just focused on that single type of user. And we thought, hey, everybody's happy now. And we released on January 3rd, 2018. And the 5th of June, there were actually people downstairs at our office being mad. So the office was inside the airport. What happened? What we didn't know, what we didn't do the research. So internal personnel was actually using the app because their normal system was really crap. And all of a sudden, the things they are used to isn't in the app no more. Taxi drivers. We didn't know taxi drivers were using the airport app to know which flight is from Dubai because they can charge more. And it seems obvious. Yeah, now we know. And it seems logical to support at least those kinds of profiles for a user. But we didn't know. So don't always expect the app to be used the way you think it is expected. And it's normal human behavior. We think we tend to know everything. We are cool developers, we're cool designers, but that is not how it works. And a good way is to start thinking. Start thinking about the user. So how can we start thinking like them, like that weird creature that at the other end of the interface? Well, let's look at some processes, and you may have seen them. Obviously, do the user research, and I can't emphasize this enough. And it doesn't have to be like a fancy office where there's so much videos, you feel like you're a voyeur. No, if you just ask a colleague to do like a first prototyping sit down, ask them, well, hey, we did something new, or we are creating something, or we're extending the app. What do you think of this? Maybe don't ask them, just sit them down and say, hey, what do you think you're looking at? Oh, or another question is, ooh, I'm getting back. Another way is I always ask my family just to have those sneak previews of stuff I do. And it does help me because my mother is, although she's really good at Facebook, she doesn't really know the ins and outs of an app. So getting a different point of view does help me test if something is good. Another way, so who was at the session this morning about design sprints? Well, who wasn't? That's honest, respect. A good way is design thinking. And I always think of design thinking of there are so many different ways of actually thinking about the whole design spectrum. so I was in London, and it was no in Germany, and it was 2 years ago, and there was a truck was stuck beneath the bridge, and I just observed because I was the first there. I couldn't do anything. There were no people hurt, thank God. And the situation was really interesting because how can you unstuck the truck? So probably the fire people were thinking, well, we have to take down the whole truck part by part. Or the police officers, no, we have to take down the bridge. Can't we do anything? And what I didn't know, there was actually somebody in the crowd says, why don't you inflate the tires and just drive back? So that whole concept of thinking about solving problems, it is a really good process to share with each other. And that starts with design thinking. And design thinking, it is a process, so I will skip over this because most of you, besides you, already saw this morning. It is people-centered. It's part of the core of the people that you are focusing. It is creative because you're thinking out of the box, you're sharing with each other all the possibilities to solve that problem. It is hands-on. Most of the time it's actually prototyping stuff. So getting good hands on actually solving the problem. And it's iterative. You can change, well, iterative, it's the meaning, iterative. You can do it over and over again without actually breaking stuff or doing something weird. And another good example is, so I have a colleague, who knows what this is, by the way? Sorry, eh? Yes. So her biggest problem was, whenever she took a banana to work, it was kind of swooshy and they're all dancey. So she bought like a container where she can put in her banana. Hey. For me, the first time I saw this, I thought, well, this is silly. But then it kept me thinking, well, it is a good solution. It is an easy solution. You have something hard that protects something really soft. There is one problem, though. To get the banana in, she had to sort of squeeze the banana in. So problem resolving and a problem again. And she took it even further. So what I thought this was an apple. Yeah. But she's not using it for an apple. Again, different perspective. I didn't know that. But for her, her problem was solved. Her problem was solved enough for her to get by. And we forget, if you start doing like design thinking and elaborating on this, even though for you as a designer or a developer, it might seem strange, for another person that you're working with, it might seem totally obvious. Another way is, even a step further, is doing the design sprint. So as was discussed this morning, basically it's a way to validate a concept, an idea. First of all, you have to think of, well, what's the actual problem we want to solve? What are some solutions? What's the best solution for our problem? Building a prototype and actually have that being validated at the end of your day 3, 4, or 5, depending on the process you feel comfortable about. And it doesn't mean like if the product isn't a success, then your design is a failure. No, it's about the validation. It's actually knowing we did a good job, but we have to go forward, or we didn't do a good job, and these are the lessons learned. So it's that whole process that you can start thinking about actual being users instead of you looking at the screen. A good example, I always like examples. So we did a design sprint for an amusement park in the Netherlands. It's called the Efteling. And one of the biggest problems when you go to an amusement park is you have to wait to go on, let's say, a roller coaster. In this case, it was like for kiddies. I'm a father, and the most pain for me is my son has to wait for at least 10 minutes. Then it's basically, for me, hell on earth. And this was something the amusement park wanted to solve. So how can we solve those awful lines? Well, we didn't solve the line. We can't say if we hire more personnel, the line will go faster. You have your limit of what's safe per ride. So what did we do? Well, we changed it around. What if the hassle of waiting wasn't a hassle anymore? So we we prototyped a game, and then we took that game and we gave some people a mobile phone because we didn't have time to put it in the store. And we thought, well, maybe with a QR code we can sort of fake it, but we didn't tell them it was a prototype. And what happened? Did we solve the problem? Any feedback? You have to yell because I'm half deaf. No, we actually didn't solve the problem at all. Different. We even made it worse. Because what happened? What we didn't know is people were so mesmerized by the game, they were not moving. No, they wanted to play the game. So we didn't solve the problem, but at least we knew we had to figure out something completely different, and the focus wasn't on the actually getting the queue less. It is focus on what to do during those 10, 15 minutes. So in the end, they had different screens, and we just played some fun movie, and that was okay. Another good way is be your own user. And Marie, this one is for you also. She works at a company, it's quite a cool company. And what they do is, so they deliver food. And what they do is, prior to you starting work or during your first onboarding period, you actually are a driver of driving the food to the customer. That means you get the full-on experience what the customer is experiencing, or the driver is experiencing, because drivers are also their customers. So this is a good insight. Eat your own dog food. Figure out by doing. Another good example is we focus a lot on the normal user, but there's more rare users than normal users. And one particular group is people that have like a visual impaired. Hey, you can easily for iOS and Android have like visual talkback or voice talkback, meaning if I focus on an element, it will say email, open. So people that can't read or can't see that well can use for Android talkback. And what I always say, well, if you create something with accessibility, you have to test it yourself. Again, quite easy. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be difficult to actually getting your product known to you as a user, because you are users as well. So in conclusion, and we still have time, you can't please everybody. Trust me, we try. You always get those dumb reviews on iTunes or Google Play that you can't just ignore them. People tend to bitch all the time. So that's normal. I don't mean to say like the reviews on iTunes or Google Play is worthless. Investigate, but you can't please them all. So don't try. Don't try to hit those 99 pleased users, 99% pleased users. Do the research. Do your research. Know your audience. Know the people that use your app. Know how they use it. I can't emphasize enough, and it seems quite normal, but it isn't. How many times are you just at your desk doing your job, and that's fine, but go out, go into the subway, see how people are using their mobile app. A good example is last week there was like a heat wave in the Netherlands, and everybody was like stressing out, and all I've been doing, I went to the local fire brigade and just sit there and ask if I can see how they're doing what they're doing, just to find out how those target people, what they do. And always ask why. Why do you click a button? There's a reason behind it. Why are you using that specific mobile app? Why are you using Google Maps to get around? Do you use the AR feature or don't you? Ask somebody that's having difficulty, invite them over and ask them, why is it hard? without cluttering with all the solutions you already thought of. Just be honest, ask for feedback. It is valuable. And pick a process that works for you. I'm saying if a design sprint isn't for you, then don't use it. It's a waste of time. But if you think it might be valuable, try it sometimes. What can go wrong? Yeah, it's only 3 days, 4 days, but it might be valuable for you. There is always something to take from a process that you want to try. And start thinking. That's it. Thank you.
Okay.
Before we answer, I always want to do this.
I was going to remind you.
Yeah, do you want to take a selfie? Yes, I do. People downstairs just wave at the top. Yeah, you can make noise if you like. Come on, you can do better than that. Thank you. Gracias.
So we've got time for a few questions. First, there's some question around what do you think is the best approach for creating inclusive design? If there are so many unique experiences and needs, how do you take that into account?
No, it doesn't take any consideration. What kind of degree you should have just asking users for feedback? It doesn't have to be hard. Sure, you have your official user research and you can have your studies, but in the end, it's just you talking to or looking at users and see how they interact with their interface.
So for example, how might you get the right set of users or how you might get a more diverse set of users to give you that feedback?
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for people on that?
Do I have any? That's a broad question. Do I have any tips? I have plenty of tips. I gave like 45 minutes of tips. No, actually, just...
So that's a soft no, or?
No, just have a look at who your target audience is. For instance, a banking app. You know people will do like the draws. So go out near an ATM or somewhere where there's a lot of transaction and just sit down and see how people are using their mobile phones.
So people have a couple of questions about the watch, so maybe you can talk a little bit more about that example in terms of what you meant, in terms of how they solved that left-right-hand problem.
I'm still not sure. I'm still not sure. I think they just took their losses. And does anybody have a Apple Watch that does have the crown on the correct side? Sorry?
It just flips over if you choose the other side.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. Okay, no, it was actually not... iOS lover.
Maybe a question about tools. Do you want to share any examples of what tools you use to make sure that you avoid some of these pitfalls?
Yeah, so most of the time when we do investigate the user and do new features or new stuff, we tend to use a lot of prototyping tools. Which can easily be just a piece of paper and pen. It doesn't have to be fancy. Obviously, you have your Sketch, you have your InVision, you have plenty of plugins for your normal design tools, like Balsamic, and which you can easily use for prototyping. But it doesn't have to be fancy. No, it's quite easy. What more easy just grabbing a piece of pen and paper, sit down with a colleague, sketch something up, maybe ask your mother, hey, if you look at this screen, what do you think it means?
And when it comes to balancing user expectations versus like business goals, do you have any examples of how to do that?
Okay, yeah, well, that's the most toughest question I always... business and user expectation doesn't go well together. So business is all about basically earning money, grabbing the user attention as long as possible. So they are really looking into features instead of users. Users just want to solve problems or just want to do quickly as possible. So they don't want to have a cluttered app. The business does because you can have so many cool features. You have to think of the essential thing you want to solve, focus on that, and ease them into multiple features or multiple possibilities. But don't give them an app saying, here's everything, good luck with it.
Okay, well, we're out of time, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.